You're listening to About My Father's Business, presented by IRONWIFEY. Without further ado, here's your host, the Iron Wifey herself, Michaela.
What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of About My Father's Business, the podcast presented by IRONWIFEY. Now, today's guests are two amazing and humble souls that hail from the Midwest. Yes, my old stomping grounds. They are from Beavercreek, Ohio, and they not only are the young adult pastors at the Lifehouse Church in Beavercreek, but they also have their own podcast called Hack Your Lack, where they're teaching us how to replace our weaknesses with God's strength. And they own their own coffee company called Kind's Coffee, which is absolutely amazing. And so I really want to encourage you guys throughout this episode to sit back. They have an amazing love story that they're going to share with us, as well as just they dropped the mic, y'all. They dropped the mic to the teeth. They dropped the mic. And so there's a lot of wisdom, a lot of words of encouragement, and a lot that goes on when it comes to running all these businesses, managing your marriage, and also just doing what it is that the Lord has told you to do. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, grab your coffee. Yes, grab your coffee and sit back and tune in as I introduce to you all Isaiah and Beka Roebuck. Isaiah and Beck, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, we're so excited.
I am so excited to have you guys. And honestly, I feel like such an Insta stalker because we're going to do some things that kind of date back to when you first started Instagram. So please excuse me if I'm just prying into your lives, okay?
How far back though? Are we talking 2015? We talking,
Well, Beck's Instagram goes back to 2015 and yours goes back a little bit longer.
In your defense though, I've deleted a lot of posts. So it's easy to get to the beginning of what I have on there. It doesn't take long.
All right, cool. Well, like I said, at least I get answers to my stalking. So I appreciate you guys for this time.
That's right.
But we're just going to jump right in. First question. What does it mean to you guys, individually, actually, to be about your father's business?
Let's go. I'll start it off. I think for both Beck and I, we had grown up together. And I don't know if we'll talk about that more a little later. If you're
we will.
I'm sure we will. But man, we grew up, and I think that we both had separate intentions. And Beck was more about the father's business, where I was a little more confused about business in general. And okay. I wanted to learn how to, build a business up from an early age. So I had grown up with my dad, busy as a bee, killing it in business. He had upwards of 100 rental properties growing up.
Oh, wow.
He had a really, really large garage building business.
Okay.
And he was always also too just in random side hustles. So he had this, I laugh at it now. I'm not going to name the name of the company, but it was a pyramid scheme. But
okay.
my dad was such an entrepreneur. He killed it. And I think, I could be wrong on this, but I think to this day, so it ended up like they all do, but it ended upwards of probably, I'd say 10 years ago. And to this day, I think he still gets a lot of free stuff. And when I say a lot of free stuff, I mean a lot of money's worth of product from this because he just killed it and is still benefiting from it. And he had his hands in a lot of things. So from an early age, I think I respected it. I think I admired it, Michaela, to be honest with you. And I was just like, that's what I want to do. And I think if I can speak a little more candidly, I thought that's what a man looks like. A man is somebody who is just grinding 70 hours a week and is just firing on all cylinders at all times. So I grew up with that perception of in my eyes, what business looked like. So I continued down that path, and I went down the wrong path. However, as I've grown up, I've learned that being about the Father's business is making sure that in everything you do, in business or in your life, you're giving God the glory.
Amen.
Yeah, I guess I'll answer for me. And since I was later in high school, I pretty much always had the idea of what I wanted to do for more of a career would be ministry oriented.
Okay.
But something I've learned along the lines is just because it's ministry oriented or you're your goals or the things you're doing are about ministry doesn't mean it's about the Father's business.
Correct.
And so whether or not you're in ministry or you are just, working a regular job, you're a student, whatever you're doing in life, being about the Father's business is something I think we decide to do daily. Like the Bible says, pick up your cross daily. And I think it's consistently, even following along the lines of like the Lord's Prayer and inviting God's will and his kingdom into our lives every day.
Yeah. Yes. Amen. Yes. So I want to dive into each of your spiritual journeys, and I want to know, Isaiah and Beck, when were you first introduced to Jesus Christ?
Probably about the same time.
Okay.
At birth.
At birth, we accepted Jesus in our lives out, from day one. Yeah, but honestly, that's pretty much how it went. So Beck and I both grew up. She grew up in a really small town, and I grew up in a little bit of a bigger town. You're from Ohio. Have you ever heard of Lima, Michaela?
I have heard of Lima.
You know Lima? Nice.
Yeah.
That's where I'm from. And I was going to say home of the, but I don't know what it's home of. Cupie. Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the staple of Lima. But I grew up there. She grew up about 30 minutes south. And we went to church together from the jump. So I was born into that church. She was born into that church, and we grew up. So for both of us, I mean, it's easy to say that we were always Christians almost in a way because our parents kind of put us into that church from an early age, and we did find a love for Jesus so early on. But I think everybody can relate to this. We all find ourselves in a position to where we are learning about Jesus for ourselves, opposed to just being under our parents and going to church because we're supposed to, or we have to. And so for me, honestly, Michaela, I was probably around 13 when I really figured out what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus. And I remember there was one Sunday, I think about it often. There was one Sunday I was with my cousin, and they had an altar call. And at the time, being 13, to be transparent, I was kind of wild at 13. I was awkward, but at the same sense, I was also a heathen. I was like, so yeah, it doesn't mix well. I feel like if you're a heathen, you can't be really awkward, but I was an awkward heathen, and I was always trying to impress people. So my cousin was older than me, and I was always trying to impress him by any means necessary, whether it was, anything. I won't go into it, but just a lot of things. I was always trying to impress him and other people. And it was the moment where I finally decided, you know what, I'm not going to just be in this church because my parents go here, but I'm going to make the decision. And he was standing right beside me. And I remember I walked down, and it was the hardest walk because I was like, he knows I'm going down here. But it was the moment to where I decided, I'm going to make my relationship with Jesus serious, and I'm going to get about it. So, yeah, that's kind of where it started for me.
Yeah, I think for me, I pretty much my whole life I would have said that I believed in God and said I was a Christian, but probably when I was, I think it was like this summer before my senior year in high school, around there was when I kind of realized that I needed to be serious about it. And I think, like Isaiah kind of mentioned earlier, if you grow up in church, like everybody comes to a point where either you decide you believe this for yourself or you don't, because I had to eventually get to a point where I wasn't really like a young kid in my parents' beliefs, and I was just like living in their world that like I believe this too, and I had to be serious about it. So
yeah,
I love it. Amen. Now, it's so funny, Isaiah, that it was around age 13 where you really decided to dedicate your life to Christ, because I've seen a common theme in every interview that I do. And it's around that age, 12, 13, 14, or 15, where like we tend to like really decide like, okay, Jesus is somebody that I really want to follow. Right. And the whole reasoning behind this podcast is to be about the Father's business. And in the Bible, in Luke, it talks about Jesus being about the Father's business at age 12, 13, when he was in the temple. And he's like, his parents like, where'd you find me? Or where you been? And he's like, didn't you know I was in the temple being about my Father's business? Like, so I just think it's like so awesome how like literally every interview, there's been a common theme where people are like, yeah, it's around this time, like when I got out of my 12s and into my teens, where I really decided to like be all in for Christ.
Isn't that funny? Yeah, I think I can look back in that time frame to where you're going to church when you're I don't know 6, 7, 8, and you just don't understand. I feel like you understand on a surface level, but you just I don't know. It's hard for your mind to comprehend those kind of things. And I feel like by the time you're 13, you kind of understand a little bit more about even sin, and everything in regards to your relationship with God. So I feel like that was the time to where I had to decide, because I knew I was all about the peer pressure, and I was like, well, if I don't get ahead of this quick, it's probably going to get ahead of me. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's crazy. I think that's no coincidence, but I think that it's special when you can look back on those times and just see Jesus working on your life, and kind of putting those things into your spirit, even when you are heavily influenced by your cousin.
Nope, I understand. And speaking of influence, who would you all say has played a huge spiritual or had a huge spiritual impact or influence in your lives?
Wow, that's a great question. I'll kick this one off. So there is a man by the name of Kylan Boozer from that church. And Beck and I had actually attended that church we went there up until last year. So we were at that church, until I was 25, she was 26. And he was the one person that felt like, just growing up, he was our youth pastor. So it's about 7th grade. Funny, about that same time frame is when I switched to his class. And I just felt like there was a authenticity about him and a transparency that was just special. And it really resonated with me. And that's what I wanted, because I knew that the world was enticing because of that authenticity. We all know and have felt that before. So it was really cool to see that could be on the other side as well. And to see that you can glorify God in your authenticity and be a real person, you know what I mean? Not a fake person, to be a real person, but still be about the Father's business, And so yeah, that was the one person growing up that I just always looked up to. And to this day, to be transparent with you, I look up to him in a big way. He's got a book, if I can plug, I think it's on Amazon.
Shameless plug, go ahead.
But it's called In the Trenches, and he's just great. He's a great leader when it comes to just volunteering. He's got a lot of wisdom about that field, and that's somebody that I feel like,
he's a great leader of leaders.
Exactly. Yeah, and I feel like he shaped the person I am today, honestly.
Nice.
Yeah.
I would say growing up the exact same, because, he was our youth pastor from 7th grade until we graduated high school. And then even after high school, I was pretty involved at that church and, doing internships and things. And so I would definitely say, I know there's a lot that I've learned about ministry, and just, even I feel like he, for both of us, helped really steer us as teens, when we were in his youth ministry. And so I would say absolutely Kylan, and then Pastor Kylan, and then I'd say my adult years, his mom, honestly, has a good influence for sure.
She's gonna like that answer. She'll probably listen too.
She scored so many points with mother-in-law.
I'll say this quick sidebar here, but my mom, she listens to our podcast all the time, and she said something the other day. She's like, yeah, I listened to it twice. And I was like, oh, cool, you listened to 2 episodes? And she's like, no, I listened to the same episode twice. And I'm like, Mom, chill. But she is
number one fan.
Yeah, so.
I love it. Now, I am so curious because you guys have a really cute love story. You've known each other all the time. I mean, you literally just dropped a 10-point, you scored a 10 right now with mother-in-law. So shout out to mother-in-law if you're watching this right now. Beck truly loves you, and
yes.
You got a good daughter-in-law. But you guys have a really cute love story, and I saw a post on Instagram back in the day where
no, Michaela.
I told you we're gonna go there, but Isaiah was like, hey, I got out of the friend zone to the end zone.
Let's go.
So you scored with Beck. I'm so curious how you went from friend zone to the end zone.
Are we going there?
I feel like I should answer that because I would,
You can give your side of the story, but let's be honest, there's 2 sides of every story, you know what I mean?
Okay, that's why I feel like friend zone is such a bad term, or maybe it shouldn't be looked at as bad, because his friendship is what made me fall for him.
It's
That's
funny
simple.
though. You know what's funny about that, Michaela, is that's the girl answer.
It's the
You know what I
truth.
mean?
It's the truth.
Every guy
because
listening is like,
the more
that's
I
not
got
okay.
to know you, the more I liked you.
You know, I will say this. So I will make a extremely long story as short as I can. But I was really into her. So we had met when I was about that same time frame when I was like 13, 12 or 13, and we met at our youth group summer camp where it's actually right down the road. We met at Wright State for like a week, and we did this youth retreat, and it was the first year where I was in that grade. So I was like, this is the big leagues, Isaiah. This is your time to shine. And my 12-year-old self I didn't know how to dress myself. I didn't know how to conduct myself. I told you I was really awkward as a kid. And so we had met and we had talked one time on that trip, and that was it. And I was like, there's something about that girl. And so we had gone back and we added each other on MySpace. Hey, what
Oh
up?
my gosh.
Of course.
And I don't know if I made your top 8 or not. You probably made mine pretty quick. And I really liked her. I was into her, and she wasn't into me. I was
wasn't.
friend zoned from the jump. But Michaela, she made me a proposal. In
Okay.
8th grade, she was in 9th grade, and she already. Hey, listen, already, I got game. I thought anyways I had game. But she had said, hey, look, we have this homecoming at my school, and you should come with me. And so we had mutual friends. She's about to tell her story. I can just feel her right now looking at me. And she had a friend, and that friend had a boyfriend that was friends with me. So she felt obligated, as she says, listen.
I did.
Listen, I don't know.
My like 14-year-old self, or however old it was,
Right.
felt obligated.
So regardless if she felt obligated or not, she took me to the dance. Okay, and Michaela, that was everything for me. I went to a private school, and this was when I say big league. So I thought that youth camp was big leagues. This was Isaiah.
I mean, you just went to a dance with a 9th grader. Like, you got the
that's
older girl.
everything.
Like, you are already on top.
That's everything.
But secular music, they didn't play
I've
that
never
at
probably
his
even
school.
heard of. No, again, that's where that heathen comes back in. I probably did, but the awkward comes back in, okay, as well.
Mhm.
So I go with her, and just embarrassingly bad. I wore, it was like a sweater vest, and I had hair back then, and I had this mop of a haircut, and I remember it was really big in the back too. I just didn't know how to conduct myself honestly at all, appearance wise, but also just listen in public. I was a wreck, and she caught on pretty quick that I was a wreck, and so she ditched me, Michaela.
At the dance?
At the dance.
I did.
She ghosted me.
I did.
Listen, and I say this too. She bailed. And listen, looking back, hindsight 2020, kind of understand. You know what I mean? I don't blame her. But we went on, and I was like, man, I had one shot. I ruined it, and I couldn't get over her, okay? And I'm like, man, this is the worst. I really wanted this girl. But we went on a missions trip. Such a cliche. Just, hey, listen, such church kid, you know? Can we just take a minute? And we went on a missions trip to West Virginia that year, and we became, as Beck says, friends. Now, Michaela, I didn't think we were friends. I was like, oh, you're telling me there's a chance, because we were talking, and in my mind, I'm like, this is it. Like, I'm back in the game. And so we get back, and I tell her friend, I'm like, hey, do I have a shot with Beck? And she's like, no, she just got a boyfriend. I'm like, no. So then, yeah, we went on for a couple more painful years of me being friend zoned. But I will say this, it does, for guys out there, like I said, guys don't hear that. Guys are like, hey, the friend zone's the worst. But I will say that those couple years when we were, 14 and 15, we really did build that foundation of understanding each other, learning each other, not on a dating basis, but on a real basis. And I feel like that has benefited us a lot, even though it was painful as a 14 and 15-year-old to be friend zoned by the girl of his dreams,
No, but I love it. And Beck, you got to give us your side. You got to give us your side.
So, yeah. So, I mean, I remember meeting Isaiah at church camp. But I guess I just didn't have that lasting impression like he did, because I know we kind of like
That was
talked over
forgettable.
MySpace, and really like when we first met, that's kind of was the basis of it. And like he said, we had like mutual friends. For whatever reason, I had the sense of obligation, like, oh, I should probably invite him, and I did, and it was like really awkward.
The
I
most awkward.
hated it.
Oh,
He was super awkward. I was awkward, and
yeah.
I bailed, and I just wasn't having fun.
You know.
But yeah, like he said, we went on that missions trip that next summer, and so we really did become like legit friends. We didn't really know each other very well when we went to the dance, and it was awkward, but we did become friends. And so that was like, freshman year when all that took place, and it
Yeah.
wasn't until halfway through my senior year when we started dating. So pretty much he was my friend all through high school. So it was a long time, and like I had a boyfriend and other boys I liked, and finally, like, just the more we became friends, the more I started to like him. So I think, we attribute a lot. Yeah, we were kids when we met, and so we had the opportunity to grow up together.
Yeah.
Like if you're an adult, you probably don't want to give somebody that much time to get to know them before you commit, because you're ready for a
Time's
relationship.
not on your side, yeah.
But we attribute a lot of like our success to just because we did, number one, we knew each other for so long before we dated, and we were friends, like legit friends. And also, we dated, we started dating when I think we were both,
I was 16, you were 17.
I was 17, yeah. So we were pretty young when we started dating, so we did date for a while too before we even got engaged. So I think we had years together before we even really committed to like marriage. And so we attribute a lot of our success to just really just knowing each other for a long time, because we knew what we were getting.
Correct. Yeah, we did.
So basically, Isaiah, the friend zone saved your life.
Listen, it wasn't bad to me. It wasn't bad to me. I've encouraged a couple of guys. There's a other side to the friend zone if you can be persistent and if you can build a relationship, because I'm not kidding. It was the worst in your high school years. And I had talked to girls too, but it was just, I just always wanted Beck. So yeah, in high school, that's everything, you know what I mean? But looking back, I can see that those were monumental years for preparing us to be married, honestly. And like Beck said, when the time came and we did get married, there was nothing that we didn't know about each other. And even really little details about each other to where I know that this might get on Beck's nerves, you know what I mean? Or there's things that you just know about each other that helps you in marriage, and it's really applicable. So yeah, it was for sure. It was a long time, but it was good at the end. So
I love it. Now I am going to dive a little bit into your marriage. You guys will be celebrating 4 years.
Yeah.
Next week. Is it next week? Yeah, next week.
Yeah.
June 24th.
Thanks for reminding me, Michaela.
Oh yeah, that is coming up.
And now, hey, your guy over here is on Amazon trying to get a present real quick. Yeah, it's next week.
Well, congratulations on almost 4 years of blissful marriage. I'm curious, how did the Lord prepare each of you individually for marriage?
That's a great question.
I think for me, the most important thing was that we didn't break up, but we did have a time of separation. So he went away like on an internship. And for me, I needed that because I ended up at a place in our relationship when we were dating where I was just honestly a little bit too attached to him emotionally, and
it happens.
Even when you're married, like it's just not healthy, you know.
It's not.
And so for me, having that type of separation initially was really hard, but then once we got into it, I realized how much I needed it, because it kind of helped me gain, I guess, like some independence and just confidence in myself. And, you know, that even though we were still together, we were still dating, like I needed that to just grow in myself.
Yeah, I think for me, so she had talked about, I went on a construction internship, and I got to get this in here because she put me in the friend zone, but I kind of put her through a situation too because she wanted to get married from the jump. So it switched pretty quickly, which is really weird looking back on it. But it went from me wanting to have her really bad and I couldn't get her, from her wanting me really bad and I wanted her, but I just didn't know what I wanted at the age of 18. You know what I mean? So
why didn't want to marry at 18?
19, though. You know, check your heart, babe. At 19, she's like, let's get married after the internship. And I just didn't know what I wanted. So,
well, I'm a year older, so that's 20.
Hey, babe, it's okay, you know. But, so yeah, she was 20, I was 19. And I had this season to where I just really didn't know what I wanted. And it wasn't healthy, but looking back, I think it just really developed me into a man who could make decisions because I didn't know how to make decisions at that age. And I remember talking to a good friend of mine. He worked in my department where I was working. He was actually a semi-pro basketball player in Lima. Really cool guy, Johnny. And I had a conversation with him after work. We went out to eat. And he's like, "Bro, what are you waiting on? You wanted her all through high school. You got her now, and now you don't know how to make a decision, you know." So, so yeah. After that night, I drove home and I was like, why haven't I pulled the trigger? You know, she's the girl of my dreams. She loves God. We know each other on a deep level, and it makes sense, you know, and it's something that I wanted to do at that moment because I was just so caught up in decisions, not even just in the context of marriage, but in career and, you know, at 19, who isn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, or 20, I guess, regardless, that's when I decided that I wanted to make it official.
Yeah. He waited so long that I promise you, like before he proposed, I didn't know he was going to propose. And I was like starting to think in my brain, like, I'm going to give him like so many months. If he doesn't propose to me, I'm breaking up with him. Because I'm not waiting forever. Like it got to that point.
Literally. And all the while I'm planning the engagement of her dreams. So
but he did not hint anything that he was even ready. And I was like,
lock,
I'm going to break up with him because I'm not doing this forever.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a little curious.
You had a lot of people in your ears, you know, and she had her grandma, hey, you know, girls get to talking. And so I knew.
Did you say my grandma?
I feel like, I don't know. That was the first example that came to my mind. But regardless, yeah, there was that time and I made the decision and it was, watch this, the best decision of my life, you know. So
now I am a little curious because there's another Instagram post of you popping the question and it looks really beautiful because there's water in the background. So what is this amazing engagement that you had planned that almost got you broken up with?
You know, it almost got me in trouble, Michaela, but she had always wanted to go to the state of Oregon. We loved to hike growing up and there's a lot of hiking there and mountains and that kind of thing. So I wanted to surprise her in a big way and let's be transparent, I just wanted to flex. I was like, listen, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. So I planned everything to the T. I actually have a video. If you wanted to watch it, it's on YouTube. It's like a 2-minute clip, but I got a GoPro. I went all out, Michaela. I got a GoPro that I brought. I got a ring box with a camera in it. Listen, just flexing all over the place. So we went and I actually surprised her on a night. And I said, hey, look, her niece was just born. And she was born like a week ago, and I said, let's go see your niece. And then we were driving on I-75, and this is close to you here, but we hit the Troy exit, and I was like, hey, put this blindfold on. And she's like, wait, what's going on? And she put the blindfold on. Now, your guy didn't gauge how far the Cincinnati airport was from Troy. And so she had the blindfold on for an hour and something.
Got stuck in rush hour traffic.
And listen, hindsight's 2020. I couldn't. She knew that we were going straight on 75, so it didn't even make sense that I put a blindfold on you. But regardless, I just committed to it. And I was like, keep that blindfold on. And so we got to Cincinnati, and I surprised her. Her mom packed all of her bags. They were in the bed of my truck, hidden so she wouldn't see them earlier. And I had the tickets ready. And quick side note, though, I haven't thought about this in forever, but I had the tickets. We went to the gate, and I'm like, hey, we're going to Oregon. And they're like, those tickets are for tomorrow. So we had to wait an extra day. Hey, listen, just not very prepared, but I was just flexing. So I was like, let's just boom, boom, boom. So regardless, we went to Oregon, and I proposed in Oregon. Yeah, and it was a good time.
I love it. Well, again, congratulations on almost 4 years, June 24th coming up. So definitely a huge milestone in marriage. So I'm super excited for what the Lord has in store for the next 4 years for you guys and for lifetime.
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
My pleasure. Now, do you have any advice for any newlyweds? You know, from the last 4 years, some lessons that you may have learned that you may want to help someone else who may just be embarking on that trip to Oregon?
I'd say be patient because there's a lot of learning.
Yeah.
Even though we we grew up together, we knew each other for a long time, we dated for a while. Like there's a lot that is new and just trying to figure out. And even like for example, like with finances, like we both had the same mindset. Like we didn't want to, get any unnecessary debt. Like, we both wanted to save. Like we had the same mentality, but at the same time we treated money very differently. Like he was definitely a little bit more of a free spender. I was definitely
Oregon. Hey, listen, perfect example, Oregon.
I was like a tightwad.
Yeah.
And so even though we had the same goals, it still took us time to learn how to like do finances together. And so like just things like that, I think there's always going to be a little tension because you've got two individuals with two different thought processes, even if you have the same goal and same intent, coming together trying to achieve it. And so just I'd say like be patient and have grace on each other and find ways to work through things together and like, find a way that you can work on things, whatever it is that you kind of like do it together and not just, hey, adjust and do how I want to do it.
Amen.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great answer, Beck. And I think that we had talked about obviously knowing each other for a long period of time, but I just think learn each other as much as you can in as short a time as possible. You know what I mean? If you have an engagement, it's a 9-month engagement, I would just encourage anybody to really kind of lean in and understand that person as much as they can before they get in, because once you get in, it's a different animal. And so, I would just encourage people to just understand your spouse or future spouse on a significant level before you get to that place. And also for the guys too, I would just say, when an argument comes up, just say you're sorry. Sometimes it's just take the L.
Take the L.
Take the L. It's gonna help you out, bro. I get it. You probably might get in the wet, but it's gonna save you a lot of headache. And that's for sure a good hack right there. That's an applicable piece of advice right there. Just take the L. Take the L sometimes.
Yes. # take the L.
Yeah, that's right.
I would say, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to add to what he said, that something too along the lines of like arguing is pretty much anybody can probably agree that you start arguing about something and that's never what you end up arguing about.
Right.
And like something that stuck with me is something we recently talked about at one of our staff meetings at church, is that when emotions run high, wisdom runs low. And so I say that too, like that works. And I think pretty much every angle of life where there's emotion and it's necessary. But when you're in an argument, like most of the time, that's not even what you end up arguing over. So
and the opposite is true too. I mean, when emotions are low, wisdom is high. So
So I think it's good to get to a place where even if you need to take a breather, to let your emotions settle down and you can gain some more wisdom again. And then do it.
She's dropping the mic, guys. She's dropping the mic. Spitting facts right here. Yes.
Not a mic right here. If you want to drop it, I'll make it happen.
Yes, dropping the mic. Now, you kind of set up the perfect segue, Isaiah, to our next kind of just topics within this interview. We told the guys to take the L, which is a great hack.
It's a hack.
I like how you did that there. And for a while, Isaiah, it's so crazy. You were the host and the podcast producer of the Dream On podcast, which was a show under Dream On, this organization that empowers people to pursue their dreams. But now you and Beka have your own podcast, Hack Your Lack. What is Hack Your Lack? Where did you come up with this idea? Like, what are we hacking? What are we lacking? Help us out.
I love it. So we, not to, just I plugged my old pastor, but I'll plug, I just uploaded an episode today where we talked for an hour exclusively about Hack Your Lack and what it's about and kind of our process in it. So, so like you said, I had done that podcast. And for me, podcasting was something that I had an interest in right away. I talked about how I turned old right away when I got married, because as soon as we got married, I just listened to talk radio for a hobby. That was just like my thing. And so I developed this passion, honestly, for podcasting. And Beck and I, in the summer of 2016, the year we got married, we had kind of talked about it in passing a couple times. Hey, what if we started a podcast? What would that look like? Didn't really go anywhere from there. And we had started working at that same time with the nonprofit Dream On. And so they had came up to me in the wintertime. I had done one episode with them as a guest, and they reached out to me in that winter. So 6 months or so later, they said, hey, Isaiah, would you like to take this over? And for me, it was just an incredible opportunity that I didn't want to put down. So I took over and did a lot of podcasting over there. I think we finished out with around upwards of 90 or 80 episodes. And every single one besides one had a guest on it. And so I just really honed in on this thing called podcasting and really took I just developed a really big passion. So continued doing that. And fast forward, we moved to Dayton last year, and I have a lot of things on my plate. So unfortunately, we actually served as executive directors at that nonprofit along with hosting the podcast. And so we stepped down. Still fully support them. Like I said, I got a lot on my plate. So we had kind of revisited that conversation we had in 2016, and we said, hey, what would it look like if we started a podcast? And to answer your question about the name, that was something that literally came to me one day when I was working out. It was literally just in passing. I remember I was working out, and the thought just came to me, Hack Your Lack. And my first thought, Michaela, was just that would be a really good episode title for the podcast I was doing. And that was pretty much it. I wrote it in a journal that I had wrote all my podcast information in, and just kind of left it. But it always sat with me. So I would continue doing my thing, and I would revisit that. And I just thought that's a really cool name for an episode title. And then, when we got to date, and I'm just like, what if we called the podcast Hack Your Lack? Because I wanted to talk about weaknesses, because that's something that Beck and I are both passionate about, something that we've are very familiar with in the past. And we wanted to kind of teach biblical advice on how to properly deal with weaknesses by replacing your weakness with God's strength. So we're like, man, everybody has a lack, and we believe that through God there is a hack for every single one of them. So that's where Hack Your Lack was born.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that.
Let's go.
Didn't know that one. Love that.
Yeah. Yep. That's how it started. And it's fairly new. So I hadn't podcast since last summer. So I took a break from it, and then we jumped back into it, I think in April of this year. And so we're about 10 episodes deep. Today was our 10th episode, and we are having a blast with it.
I love it. What have you guys kind of learned about each other through this whole podcasting experience?
Yeah, Beck, take it.
Well, I don't know. Like, I feel like I don't know if I've learned anything new. Not to not answer your question. I'll say
just nothing. That's
because
your answer.
I feel like okay.
Just a boring answer.
Because I feel like had this been the first thing we'd ever done together, there'd been a lot to learn. And in a sense, I guess there always will be. But when we first got married, we bought a fixer-upper. And so I feel like that's what taught us how to work together, to be honest with you. And so I feel like, if we never would have tackled any big projects or anything together, I feel like there'd be a lot more to learn right now.
Yeah.
But that honestly really taught us how to work together.
Yeah, we had said some advice for people that are getting ready to get married, but I'd say if you are married and you wanted some advice, not that we're experts by any means, 4 years, but I will say flip a house that's a disaster, because it will teach you patience, it'll teach you team building, And there's so many things I talk about how when we first got married, she would be doing a project in the kitchen, and the man in me would be like, bet this is my chance to come in and kill it. And she'd be like, what are you doing? I'm perfectly capable. And so we had this friction of where she was always trying to do something independently, and I always wanted low-key to be known as the man who could do everything.
The hero.
Yeah, the hero. So we went through that patch where it wasn't, I wouldn't say difficult in their marriage, but I would say just difficult by nature.
Yeah, in the beginning. And I think that's a lesson we've carried with us, so like even with podcasting, with everything we do, is I am a little bit independent by nature, and if I have an idea, I kind of like to just do it myself. And it's not that I don't enjoy help, but I'm just a little independent. I enjoy doing things, and like I like, in regards to our house, I like being crafty. I know how to use a power tool. Like, leave me alone.
Until, hey, listen, she needs me though.
But at the same time, I have a husband that wants to feel needed. So, and so I think that's a lesson that has carried, and that's even goes with the podcasting, too. So.
Well, I think too, but there's little things. So it's not this one big thing we take away from what we've learned about each other in the podcasting section of what we've been working on, but there are little things. So we can look back on our first episode. One of the first 2 episodes, there was a time where we were just talking like this with somebody, and our go-to, Michaela, was like, hey, if I tapped you on the leg, that means that it's my turn to talk. And she tapped me, and then I tapped her back. I was like, no, fam, this is my turn. And so there was those little things to where we weren't, it wasn't an argument by any means, but there would be like, hey, maybe if I don't know, I'm trying to be careful because it wasn't ever an argument, but it was like, hey, this is maybe the structure of how we should do it. And so we have learned in little ways. And also if somebody taps, the other person, that means they're trying to talk and just let them talk. So, I mean, there's always those small things, even if you're painting the garage together. I think you always have those little things that you take away from it and honestly really build to your marriage. So I think anything you can do together. I talked about this in another one, not to keep recycling and talking about the podcast, but we had talked about how, man, even hobbies, if you can look at hobbies that you have and kind of even put them on paper, these are my hobbies, these are your hobbies, what can we do together? And as you do those together, it really builds. So for us, it's hiking. We have things that we do that we really enjoy, like hiking or anything related to coffee. So we have these things that we can do together and grow together even in our hobbies.
Yes. I love it. And we're going to get on hiking and we're going to get on coffee. But first, let's talk a little bit about coffee. Now, being about your father's business, you guys mentioned in the beginning, it's literally daily carrying out your father's business. And you guys have Hack Your Life, which is used to strengthen people in the areas of weaknesses when it comes to our relationship with Christ. And so I'm curious about the business that God has blessed you guys with, whether it be Kind's Coffee, which I see that you're already representing, little product placement here.
Hey, listen, don't think I will post up too, Michaela, and do this guy right here.
Yes, little product placement there. Or also being, the young adult pastors at the Life Church. Tell me a little bit about how you guys are carrying out your father's business in building a business like Kind's Coffee and also in serving the young adult ministry at church.
So
yeah.
I feel like I have a good answer for this. So I'd say Isaiah had the dream to start the coffee last year, and we decided to start it in January so we would deal with taxes or anything for last year. And so we decided in January to kind of start it off, and it was in February, around end of January, beginning of February, around there. So to make a long story short, we used to live a little over an hour north of Dayton. We moved here out of faith, just kind of feeling like God led us to Dayton. Neither of us had jobs here, so we were still commuting and everything. And I ended up transferring to a different location for my work, but it was still like a good 40-minute drive for me.
Okay.
And I just wasn't enjoying the commute. I know some people do that every day and they're cool with it. I didn't like it. I was used to being 5 minutes from my work, so I didn't like it. And anyways, I felt like God just spoke to me and told me to just quit my job. And I didn't know what that looked like at the time. That was he just leading me in faith? Because at the time I'd been applying for jobs that were closer and trying to set up interviews with my schedule there, and like being so far away, it was honestly just impossible. It was really hard. And so I didn't know, like, okay, if I quit, is that just God leading me in faith because he's going to help me get another job and now I'll have time to actually pursue one and whatever. So we talked about it, and I quit, and I gave him a month notice. And about 2 weeks after I quit is when we got asked to be the young adult pastors at our church. And so it kind of seemed like, we took a step of obedience in moving, took a step of obedience to me quitting. And one thing we had talked about when I quit was how like everything kind of works together, because he ended up getting a job where he's making almost basically about as much as we were making together. Well, before we moved. And so like God provided financially through his job. And we were just talking about how like when you look at marriage more from like a biblical perspective, how like what one does really can serve the other. And so like by him, his job is really providing for our household financially, but also by me not working, I can also help him pursue his dream and help more with the coffee and do more with the podcast. And so really everything comes like full circle. I don't even remember your initial question, but like I really am like trying to think. What did she ask? I don't remember what you asked, but
no,
like,
you're answering it. Don't worry, you're answering it.
Yes, like it all like like when you just listen to God and you're obedient, and because it could be easy to look at it as like, oh, Isaiah has a career and I don't do anything. Like I don't have a career, but it's like it's more than just his career, my career. It's like it's togetherness, and what by him having a job, me not, in this season of our lives, it's serving each other.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just blown away by this year. It's so cool. We can all look back on times where we really just saw God doing things in our lives, specifically in ways that just seemed impossible. And for lack of time, I won't go into the long story about how I even got this position. But as Beck stated, I was working construction out of Lima, and I was going to Columbus and Toledo and Cincinnati and all over for that. But was commuting from Dayton back to Lima for the first 3 months we were here. And just the way that God even provided my job, it was insane, Michaela. I mean, like it literally just couldn't have happened any other way besides God. And so he provided in that way. And then just to plant us here, I think that a lot of times, not to make this, because I am trying to answer your question because, Beck forgot it too, but I think so many times that we don't move because we're afraid. But if we take that step of faith, God's always right there waiting for us. And I'm telling you, we saw that all over our lives in the past 8 months, where we had taken the step of faith, not knowing what it even looked like. And to be honest, kind of bummed that it was Dayton that we were moving to.
I didn't mind.
So it was between, and this is completely honest here, it was between Africa we were going to move to for about 6 months. Texas was on the list, and then California. And California was the bigger one, the more serious candidate. And then Dayton, you know what I mean? A little disheartened. Yeah. But I think that God is always so faithful when he sees that you are listening to him and taking that step even when you're unsure. And I'm telling you, time and time again, we've seen God's hand all over this. So while Dayton would not be the place that I would want to be 10 months ago, I'm just so grateful we are here now. And in this season to where we are, like you said, we're young adult pastors. I mean, that position made itself available, and with Kinds, all these things set up, and we have a lot on our plate, but that's what's so cool too that Beka talked about, is we get to work together and really grow together in this season. So we're grateful for every single opportunity we have right now.
I love it. What's been you guys' greatest challenge trying to balance everything?
Wow, that's great. So for me, logistically, it's just time is the biggest thing. So we had talked before we jumped on here. Right now, I am still actually commuting an hour to work for the time being. So I'm waking up at about 4 a.m, getting to work, getting home in the afternoons, and just trying to balance all of these responsibilities. So I think just time management, because it's natural for everybody to want to do their own thing. But in this season, I'm learning that there's a lot of times you can't really do your own thing. And that's okay, because there's always time to do that later. And if you honor the Sabbath, your day's coming. You just got to wait for it. And I just think that when you have opportunities in life, you just can't let them waste themselves, you know. And I think that you got to be a good steward. So God's put this in our hands, and we have to be a good steward of that, and that means time management. So that's been the biggest challenge for me, but it's been rewarding to see how much we've grown in that area in the past 8 months.
I'll say for me, it's also time management, you know, for him because he's so busy. For me, because at times I'm not so busy. And that, especially in the first few months of being home, like just not feeling like I had structure to my day, like not having somewhere to wake up and be was a challenge. And especially my mentality, I was so used to just waking up, and if I didn't have to be anywhere, like, oh, that was a day off work, and it's like I can be home and relax. And I feel like I was constantly in this state of like fighting to like get out of this relaxed state of mind. And so for me, it's also been like time management, just trying to navigate how to structure my day, or like, you know, I still find the days get away from me so quick. So trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to, you know, how much time am I going to spend on doing things around the house? How much time am I going to spend on coffee? How much time am I going to spend on podcasts? How much time am I going to spend time on like things I want to pursue, like writing and all that kind of stuff. So it's been trying to figure out like, how do I incorporate all this into my day? Because I can get really lost in just doing one thing, and the next thing I know, I'm like, you know, well, I guess I should probably like cook some dinner or something. I don't know. So it's just been trying to figure out how to really organize and utilize my time.
Now, it seems that the Lord has had some amazing things in store for you guys these last 8 months. What do you believe God's plan is for your lives in the next 8 months? Where do you see Heinz Coffee? Where do you see Hack Your Leg? Where do you see Isaiah and Beka in the next 8 months?
I love it. You got great questions. You are you're great at questions.
You are.
You really are. But I mean, I think we can all dream and have ambitions. So I have things that I'm looking forward to and wanting to pursue, and goals I have for the podcast. I think this last 8 months, I've taught both Beka and I that it probably won't look, it might not look like the way that we're doing it. And I think that it's good to have goals. So to talk about my goals loosely, because I know that I'll probably say these and then, you know, some of them won't come to fruition, but we would love to just be transparent on this podcast. We would love to monetize Hack Your Leg. So we're kind of building that structure, what that looks like, and kind of, so it's been rewarding to see how much it's grown in the small amount of time that we've had it. But looking forward is just like, man, it'd be really cool if we could get some sponsors and get some ads up on the show. So that's something for Kinds. Looking to do maybe a couple pop-up shops here in Dayton and kind of make it a little more readily available for the people in Dayton. We've been working tactically to kind of hone in on Dayton specifically in that market. So I would love to continue to do that if we're here in 8 months, which I would like to be. I think we're learning a lot. So I foresee that happening. So to answer your question for Kinds, I would just love to really work on the Dayton market and kind of create. One thing I say about coffee, people ask us all the time, why did you create a coffee company? And Beka and I are very passionate about coffee, but one thing we're more passionate about is people, and people love coffee, and coffee creates community. And that's something that Beka and I feel like we are called to do. So that's something that we want to create in this community, is that with Kinds.
I love that.
Yeah. So that's what I think I want the next 8 months to look like, Lord willing.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like I'm like a daydreamer, and I am a planner, but it's hard for me to set goals and, you know, like keep my mind to it and say, I want to have this done, you know, by this time. But, you know, I have been trying to write a book, so I would love to have it finished in the next 8 months. Yeah. But to be honest, I feel like I've been in like a season lately where I'm just kind of really been like going with the flow and
along for the ride.
I really have been, which really isn't me, to be honest.
It's not. That's the funniest part, is like when you look back on your life, you're always planning, and I feel like you have really accepted the fact that you're just along for the ride. And I think that it's a better place to be. Because like I said, for me too, I get ambitious. I think the Lord uses ambition, you know, and He uses our goals for his glory. So there's nothing wrong with that. But I think that the last 8 months has just told us that as long as you just let the Lord lead, he'll do his thing. And I also think for a goal specifically, the Bible talks about how goodness and mercy follow you. And that's referring to it following you. It's not going to just, it's not going to lead you. It comes behind you. So I think that you have to be intentional with goal setting if you have these things, because if we're being transparent, we wouldn't have anything in our hands right now if we didn't take the steps. So I just think that there's something to be said for goal setting, but just understanding that God could have a separate plan,
Yeah.
And you also kind of mentioned it earlier with being obedient. Like, obedience has gotten you this far. And so, whether you have a plan or you're just going with the flow, obedience is going to take you throughout these next 8 months.
Yeah, so true. That's so good, Michaela. That's so good.
All right. Well, guys, we are reaching the end of our hour. And so I always end every interview with the same question. Iron Wifey, our motto is derived from Proverbs 27:17, which states that as iron sharpens iron, one friend sharpens another. So our motto is, as iron sharpens iron, one woman or man sharpens another, but mostly women. So I just want to start off with an answer from both of you. How are you sharpening the women in your life? And then I'd love to know from Isaiah, how are you sharpening the men in your life as well?
Thank you, babe.
Yeah.
Michaela, I'm telling you, these questions hit different. You're feeling it. You're doing such a good job.
I'd say just being in prayer with people, especially, guys do this too, but especially as women, we like to chit chat, and it's, easy to just like get talking about like what's going on, our stresses and our burdens, and just making sure that in all conversations we're glorifying God, but like especially if someone's coming to me with a problem that I'm not feeding the problem by like, it's good to listen and be understanding, but to some extent, we can be more hurtful, I think, than helpful when we're just like, kind of egging on their emotion. And so just making sure, praying with people and trying to give, like biblical advice when warranted.
Great.
And making sure I have a woman in my life that will do the same.
Yes.
Yeah, I think for me, I've just been so encouraged to see how this opportunity with the church has presented itself. And I think that's something for me that's so important, is pouring into younger men, because I had gone through those periods in my life where I was just confused and I just didn't know my identity. And one thing I talked about actually with the guys at my church last week was the idea of knowing your identity, your true identity, not trying to be another guy that you think is cool or that looks more successful than you, but understanding your true identity and who God made you to be. And then also learning your passions. And then when you create those two and glorify God with those two things, then it's crazy to see what will happen. So I think it's been cool to see how at church, we've seen so much growth in individuals that have taken steps. Something happened last Monday, I'll leave unmentioned, but just it's cool to see, and you're probably familiar with what I'm talking about. It's cool to see how, as these guys at church have been sharpening iron with each other, just how much growth has happened. So I think I'm encouraged to know that there is strength when guys even encourage each other. That's not something that, for me, it's like I get around my friends and we like make fun of each other. And it's hard as guys to kind of encourage one another. But I just think, I talk a lot about this, but I'm just big on encouragement. And I think that it really enables people to live in the full potential that God's called them to. So I think that would be my answer.
Amen. Yeah. Isaiah and Beck, where can people find you guys?
IG, I got the IG handle. I think I'm just my name, Isaiah Roebuck, ISAIAH Roebuck, ROEBUCK.
I think mine's Beka Roebuck, BEKA Roebuck.
Yeah. I think. Yep. So yeah, that's our IG. I don't have Facebook or Twitter or anything, just on Instagram. Coffee, kindscoffeecompany.com. And then the podcast, Hack Your Lack. You can find it on, I think, any podcast platform. So that's where you can find us.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with us. Thank you for sharing more about Hack Your Lack, Kinds Coffee, and your amazing and super cute love story. I mean, for all those who have been friend zoned, there is faith.
There's hope.
You can get through it. Isaiah is living proof. Like he put fingerprints on the end zone. So you got this. But guys, just thank you so much for your time. It has been such a blessing and truly an honor to just sit here and chat with you guys. And you all make sure that you go online, Instagram right now, follow them, Isaiah Roebuck, Beka Roebuck, and make sure you're supporting Kind's Coffee. If you're a coffee connoisseur and you believe in the community that they are establishing, it is definitely one that you want to check out. Isaiah and Beck, thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. Listen,
so
you're such a good host. We're
so really
grateful.
Are.
We're so grateful that
I feel like we can learn a thing or two from you.
let's set up a workshop. We need to learn. We talked about chemistry. Please help us.
Well, guys, thank you.